Now, last week, I found a story in The Economist, and I have been toying with trying to get it into the program ever since I saw it. And I've been holding it. And I think finally it may have a place here. It's called Home of the Unbrave. And it is basically about the increasing cowardice and fearfulness of more and more young people and Americans in general. And it's dated the 5th of January. And it's a story that has an incident in it. Apparently there's a place in America where it snows a lot, and the community has forbidden young people to ride their sleds. It's, well, come on, they say it's a liability issue, and I have no doubt there's fear of lawyers, but it's also they're afraid the kids might hurt themselves. And I remember when I was a kid, Southeast Hospital up there on top of the hill, and it overlooked Broadway. And I remember one year my dad, when I got my brother and I, flexible flyers. Now, if you know anything about sleds, they were the Cadillac of sleds. And we sat around and prayed for snow. Because that hill, from the top of the hospital down to Broadway, it was ideal for sledding. It was 2 levels. It had its first incline that leveled off for a while to slow you down, then another incline. And I remember going down that hill a couple of times, and it was the most fun. In that flexible flyer, you could steer it. It was so slick, I actually ended up in the curb of the street. I got nowhere near moving cars, but I got so far as the curb. I went back and told my dad about it, and he said, well, you went a little too far. You don't want to go on the street, son. But he didn't take any action. He didn't go sue the hospital or any such thing. He just told me how to avoid getting the sled in the street. Well, this story is about how, to stop all this, no more sledding. And the Economist theory is that fearfulness is overtaking America. Pull quote from the story, this crackdown on unregulated sledding. How about that? Unregulated sledding. A crackdown on unregulated sledding, for crying out loud. Seems of a piece with the recent American tendency to curb marginally perilous childhood pleasures like tricycling without body armor or venturing alone into the back garden without a Mossad-trained security detail. Shutting down sledding hills is inspired by the same sort of simpering caution that keeps Americans shoeless in airport security lines and closer to home keeps parents from letting their kids walk a few blocks to school alone, despite the fact that America today is as safe as it was during the Leave It to Beaver golden age. Now, The Economist is a Brit publication. It goes back and forth, but for the most part, it leans kind of left, which makes this story kind of cockeyed. Normally, they'd be in favor of this kind of political correctness and fear, but they are really taking after us. The ominously named Winter Storm Gorgon is set to dump scads of snow across a broad swath of America, from the Rockies to the Poconos. Law-abiding families must not rush to break out the toboggans, however, for there is a trend afoot to outlaw sledding. That's another thing. We're now naming snowstorms like we name hurricanes. Faced with the potential bill from sledding injuries, some cities have opted to close hills rather than risk large liability claims. No one tracks how many cities have banned or limited sledding, but the list grows every year. One of the latest, Dubuque, Iowa, where the city council is moving ahead with a plan to ban sledding in all but 2 of its 50 parks. You know what the headline of the story is? Home of the Unbrave. Not home of the brave, home of the unbrave. Other wholesome locales like Des Moines, Lincoln, Nebraska have also restricted sledding to within certain hills posted with a sled at your own risk warning sign. This crackdown on unregulated sledding seems of a piece with recent American tendency to curb marginally perilous childhood pleasures like tricycling without body armor or venturing alone into the back garden without a Mossad-trained security detail. I mean, they really rip us over the coals for this. And then at the end of the story, the Economist says, perhaps this is not as surprising as it may seem. Americans are not so much unusually litigious as they are unusually fearful. And this fearfulness extends to the prospect of lawsuits. The occasional jaw-dropping award in a personal injury or class action lawsuit creates, like the occasional terror attack, a salient sense of pervasive danger. It's not that Dubuque or Des Moines suddenly faces a new and extraordinary risk of getting sued into oblivion. It's just that the risk, as small as it is, now looms larger in the imagination, becoming too great for the no longer bold American spirit to bear. Shutting down sledding hills is inspired with the same sort of simpering caution that keeps Americans shoeless in airport security lines and closer to home keeps parents from letting their kids walk a few blocks to school alone. And I tell you, when you look at the behavior of institutions like CNN, our policy is not to show any images potentially offensive to one religion that will kill us if we offend them. So we will not show potentially offensive images of the prophet. Everywhere you look, The Economist raking us over the coals for being a bunch of cowards. And get their point about lawsuits here. It's not that we are afraid per se of the settlement. It's not that they think we're afraid of the actual lawsuit. Our imagination goes wild, and we keep constructing things rooted in fear that tell us, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. No, like, don't let the kid go in the backyard without body armor. You never know what's out there. Don't let that kid sled. You never know what might happen. Don't do this. And I think they have a point. And I think it's really relatable to people that run political correctness. And you see evidence of it. And you go back and look at America in a different time, and you don't see evidence of this kind of fearfulness. We had no compunction whatsoever calling Hitler what he was, detailing what Hitler was doing, showing pictures of what happened, and defining it as Nazism. We had no compunction. No, same thing with the Japanese. None whatsoever. Another break. Back to the phones when we get back. Don't go away, folks.
Say what needs to be